Welcome to Bloodmoons and the Crown, a prophetic anthology of the end times. Each week, these fictional, biblically based short stories speak to what will happen before the war at Armageddon, where Jesus Christ will return to earth and eradicate Satan and sin from our world. Learn what the Bible has to say about end times prophecy through these emotionally charged accounts of what people could one day face.
You people here, all of you need to wake the hell up. The words struck the sanctuary with the force of something that had been restrained a long time and was no longer willing to be restrained. 12,000 people went completely still. The cameras held. The security team held. In the control booth above, not one person moved. For 3 full seconds, the building held its breath. Then the boy pressed forward. You have not heeded his warnings. You are too busy with your own lives, and things are about to get rough. Rougher than they ever have been. But that's not the message. That's the reason for the message. Do you want to hear it? The entire congregation turned as one and looked at Tenor, who suddenly felt ill. A voice broke through the silence. It was Gwen Paxstone. She stood up, though she wasn't exactly sure why. It just sort of seemed to happen. Yes, tell us who you are and what the message is. The kid at the microphone searched the audience to find who had spoken. If I told you my name, it wouldn't mean anything. Besides, it's not important. I'm not being evasive, but if my gran found out what I'm doing here this morning, you would easily know my name because it would be on the front page of the obituaries. The congregation, caught somewhere between shock and bewilderment, managed a quiet, collective laugh. It was enough to break the tension. I noticed that most of you are looking over at the preacher. I'm not exactly here to talk to him. I am here to talk to you. You people of the church. I asked you if you want to hear Adonai's message. The sanctuary became silent, not knowing exactly how to respond. Gwen looked around and then, unable to think of anything else, began a slow, measured clap. After a few moments, all of the other kids she was sitting with from the youth group joined in. Then others, mostly those of the younger generation, began to clap, which grew in strength and tempo until there was a thunderous applause that rolled through the sanctuary from the front pews to the back and shook itself against the walls. The kid held up his hand, offering that same timid wave. Within seconds, the cacophony dissipated and the congregation went silent. The boy smiled. It's actually a story. You see, once there was this really rich sheikh who was traveling with his family out across the desert. He stopped his caravan outside a small village while they rested for the night. Sometime around dusk, a crowd came running toward the caravan. They were chasing a boy out of the village, trying to catch him. The boy saw the sheikh's tent and ran inside to escape. The people surrounded the tent, calling for the boy to come out. The sheikh, wondering what was going on, came out with his guards and asked, "What is this commotion outside of my tent? Go your way and leave me in peace." The crowd began yelling, demanding that the sheikh turn the boy over to them so they could take him back to the village in order to stone him. The sheikh refused, telling them that under the law, because he was a guest in his tent, the boy was under his protection. He then asked why they were so angry and wanted to kill this boy. The crowd answered, "He is a menace with no parents to care for him and causes all sorts of trouble. And just now he has become a murderer by killing another boy in the village." The sheikh thought this over, and after a time answered the crowd, telling them that he would not turn the boy over to them. The villagers answered, "But you do not understand, mighty sheikh. The boy he has killed was your son." The auditorium held its breath. 12,000 people, not a sound. The sheikh was visibly shaken by the news and went back inside his tent. After an hour, he came out with the boy and announced, "You cannot have this boy. I have decided to adopt him as my own and raise him by my example. I will teach him the ways of a life filled with compassion, kindness, virtue, righteousness, and most importantly, love." The crowd went silent and turned, walking back to the village, wondering how this man could be so forgiving. The boy let the silence sit. He understood what silence was for. One more thing before I go. I know that out of the thousands here in this house of Adonai, most of you call him God. There are a total of 47 church members here who do not have or even own a Bible. I know it might embarrass you, but I know that's how many. Exactly 47 of you good Christians. But for whatever reason, you either never had, lost, or gave away your Bible. The kid paused and scanned the congregation. Then, for the first time, he looked back over his shoulder at Pastor Tenor, who was still seated cross-legged at the back of the stage. Giving the preacher man a wink, he turned back to the audience. Could whoever does the lights, could you turn them off or down or whatever, so I can see the audience, please? A few moments later, the stage lighting diminished by a good 70%, and the house lights came up, revealing the multitude of people who were certainly getting an unexpected morning at church. Let's see if I was right. Now, be honest, I can tell you with absolute certainty Adonai is watching. If you don't have a Bible, one that belongs to you personally, please stand up. Everyone looked around, doubtful that 47 people would stand, or that this boy who had shown up at their church could possibly predict how many there would be. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then slowly, bodies began to pop up throughout the crowd. More and more stood until there were well over 40 on their feet. The boy watched with amusement in his eyes as the people stood. Something moved out of the corner of his eye, and he realized that Johnny had stood up from his own group of skaters. Not you, Johnny. You're a total heathen. Of course you don't have one. A wave of laughter moved through the congregation. Johnny looked as if he was about to say something and then thought the better of it, shrugged his shoulders, and sheepishly sat back down. As people continued to stand, a collective groan rose through the congregation. The disappointment of a crowd that had been held on the edge of its seats and was now watching the boy fall short of his prediction. Even Pastor Tenor looked disappointed. When it was all said and done, there must have been over 150 standing. Wait now. Remember I said members of this church? If you are here because someone dragged you out of bed to come, or you are just visiting, those of you who are first-timers and looking for Adonai, you can sit down. I'm only talking about those of you who attend regularly and consider yourself a Christian, and this is your church. The belonging faithful. Grateful to be off the hook, there was a sudden drop as many sat back down. Tenor's jaw dropped as he leapt to his feet and began counting. To his amazement, it sure looked like there could be 40 or so left. Moments ticked by as not only the pastor, but others began counting as well. Tenor whispered, "Oh my God, I think he's right." And then louder, "Oh my God." Others began to call out. Some began to applaud while others could do little more than sit dumbfounded. The blond boy held up both of his arms, motioning for those standing to sit down. It took several minutes before there was any semblance of order returned to the congregation. The boy continued, "Here's something that's going to make the good preacher over there have his second heart attack of the day. The church is not going to take up the offering this Sunday. No passing the plate. Instead, we, each of us here today and each one of you watching at home, are going to take whatever you are going to offer to the church and spend it. That's right. We are all going shopping. The church, Adonai's church, is going to go out and buy a Bible. You will then take the word of Adonai and find somebody who doesn't have one. It's simple, really. Just find someone and ask, 'Do you have a Bible?' And if they say no, hand them one. Even if they try to refuse, give it to them anyway. You see, they might not want it now, but they could be desperate for it in the future. Actually, I am sure of it. So just give it to them. If you don't own a Bible yourself, you're on double duty. You'll go out and buy two. One for yourself and one for that someone you find." Everyone in the congregation looked around to see what their neighbor might think of this unexpected request. Pastor Tenor realized it was time for him to become a part of today's service. Standing, he quickly made for the podium and leaned over to speak into the microphone. Yes, what a wonderful idea. We will not be passing the plate today. Take your tithes and introduce Christ the Lord to anyone who does not know who he is, or even if they do, give to them God's message. If everyone here, there are over 6,800 of you, as well as those at home, if you do this, think of what we will have accomplished today. Before the sun sets, if you find at least one person to give a Bible to, well, it will be pretty incredible. And know this. Adonai is here right now, as he always is, waiting to see what will happen. Let's make him smile. The skater boy preacher took a deep breath, held it for a few seconds, and then slowly exhaled. Stepping away from the podium, the boy walked over to where Tenor stood, and without a word, looked him in the eye. Tenor tried to think of something to say, but the strange boy's intense stare met him, and for a moment he thought he had been struck dumb. It was not fear, and it was not a warning to stay silent. It was simply that the look was so complete. It was as if the boy was looking not at him, but into him, into his soul. The boy then bent down and picked up his skateboard, turned, walked to the end of the stage, and before jumping down, offered his goofy wave. To his surprise, no one broke the complete silence. But each and every person, the ushers, the camera operators, and even the security team, gave the same short, goofy wave back. And all of them were smiling. At the edge of the stage, the 14-year-old leapt down and landed easily in front of Johnny, who immediately jumped up and motioned for all of the other boys to get up. The rest of the boys stood and mounted their boards. With the blonde boy in the lead, they all skated up the ramped incline of the main aisle without looking left or right, making their exit in the same unhurried direction they had arrived. At the back of the auditorium, two ushers opened the double glass doors. Pastor Tenor realized that as the visitors to his church skated up the ramp, he had been counting their number. 12 boys, all following the one remarkable leader. As Dar stepped out into the warm sunlight, he smiled and hopped back onto his skateboard. Behind him came the others, spilling through the double glass doors in a loose, sun-blinking cluster, boards clattering against the pavement, as the boys found their wheels and their footing and their bearings in the bright California afternoon. Johnny was the first one out after Dar, and the rest strung themselves behind him without being asked. 11 boys in various states of bewilderment and exhilaration, each one quietly turning over what had just happened, and none of them saying it yet. They fell in behind Dar the way they always fell in behind Dar, not because anyone had asked them to, and not because there was a plan. He was moving, and when Dar moved in a particular direction, it seemed like the right direction to be moving. He made his way down Santa Monica Boulevard, heading for the skate park on the boardwalk just south of the pier. The morning had become the afternoon while he was inside, and the world had remembered its plans. Traffic moved along the boulevard. People walked with coffee cups and purpose. The day was in full possession of itself, and Dar Bennett moved through it at his own speed with his hair trailing behind him and his eyes already on whatever was next. They hit the boardwalk at the pier approach and dove into the crowd without slowing. The midday boardwalk was a different animal from the early morning one. Packed, sun-bright, threaded with strollers and cyclists and slow-moving clusters of tourists who had come too far to feel any urgency about walking. Dar moved through it the way water moves through everything, finding the gaps before they fully presented themselves, leaning left, leaning right, the crowd parting with a kind of unhurried inevitability. Johnny tracked his line. The others tracked Johnny's. They wove through the dense press of it all, past the t-shirt vendors and the street musicians, and the smell of funnel cake and sunblock and ocean, until the commercial stretch thinned and the boardwalk opened up and the skate park appeared south of the pier, its broad concrete bowl catching the afternoon sun and holding it like a cupped hand. Dar rolled to the lip without pausing and dropped in, and the others followed like water following a stone. Not because they'd planned it. The bowl was there. They were skaters. That was the whole of the logic. For a while, nothing needed to be said. The sound of wheels and impact, and the clean crack of a landed trick filled the space the way music fills a room. Not as background noise, but as the actual substance of the thing. Dar worked the park with the easy, absorbed focus of someone who had been doing this since before he could explain why. He moved from the pump bumps to the quarter pipe to the flat ground at the park's center, a kick flip, a smooth heel flip, then a tree flip that landed so cleanly that two of the younger boys on the lip made involuntary sounds of appreciation and couldn't have told you which one made them. Then came the questions. They arrived the way they always do when a group of boys can no longer contain themselves, in no particular order, from whichever direction the pressure built first. It was Marcus who started it, the stocky 12-year-old in the Lakers cap, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since they'd left the church. He rolled up alongside Dar on a long, flat run. How did you know it was 47? Dar came off a pump and glided past him in a long arc, that mischievous light already settling into his eyes. "It seemed right," he said, and immediately kicked up into a nose stall on the lip that consumed the rest of the moment. Tyler went next. Lanky, 13, gap between his front teeth, always the one who needed the answer written out in full. "But you've never been there before. You've never even met that pastor. How did you know what to say?" Dar came back down into the bowl, crouched low through the transition. "The words were there," he said. "I just said them." This was not a satisfying answer, and everyone present understood this, but Dar offered no more than the answer and the warmth in his eyes, which suggested that the question was a good one, but that the full answer was simply somewhere beyond where any of them were currently standing. Which was worse than silence in a way, and somehow better. The younger ones tried too. Leo with his nervous energy. Sam with his careful, methodical way of asking things. The kid they called Donut, who almost never spoke but who now seemed to feel the weight of something unresolved pressing against his ribs, something he needed put into words before he could set it down. Each of them got something from Dar and nothing from Dar. Half answers, each one offered with the same quality of genuine warmth, as if the questions were good, the questioners were good, and the absence of a complete answer was not a withholding, but simply the honest truth of things, which made them ask again, which got them the same half answer and the same mischievous smile, and the whole cycle repeated itself until some of the boys gave up and drifted back to their own lines, and the park settled into its ordinary rhythm of wheels and impact and late afternoon light. Eventually, Johnny worked his way to the far edge of the park where Dar had stopped and was sitting with his board across his knees, looking south down the coast. The water caught the sun in long flat lines. A pelican rode the updraft above the shoreline without moving its wings. Johnny dropped down beside him. "I'm not going to let you do the smile thing." Dar said nothing. "So tell me straight." Johnny leaned back on his hands. "Did you know any of it was going to happen? Before you walked in there? Did you know?" A long silence. The surf moved at the waterline below. A jogger passed on the walk above. "No," Dar said finally. The word was simple and completely honest, and both of them understood this immediately. Then where did it come from? Dar turned the board over in his hands and studied the scratched underside, the layered evidence of every curb and rail and 10,000 feet of asphalt. The way a person studies something familiar when they are trying for the first time to put a thought into words. "I don't know," he said. He looked at Johnny then, those sea-green eyes full and direct and unguarded. "I genuinely don't know where it came from. I didn't plan it. I didn't even know I was going in there until I was already going in." He paused, and something moved across his face that was not quite certainty and not quite wonder, but was perhaps the place those two things meet before they can be told apart. "But I don't think it's over," he said. "I don't think that was the last time." Johnny sat with that. Some things required sitting with, and this was one of them. He looked out at the water for a while, then gave Dar the sideways look he reserved for moments that required it. "You owe me a lunch, by the way. I had no idea that you were going to drag me to church." Dar laughed, clean and genuine and completely 14 years old, and shoved Johnny hard with his shoulder. Johnny shoved back. They sat there a while longer in the warm, late afternoon light, neither of them speaking, listening to the surf and the distant noise of the boardwalk, and the occasional crack of a trick from the park behind them. When Dar finally stood and dropped his board onto the concrete, he did it with the quiet ease of someone who knows the next thing without needing to announce it. He stepped on, felt the familiar give of worn grip tape beneath his feet, and pushed south. He was not looking back.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope this episode has inspired and encouraged you as you draw closer to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. If you have thoughts, questions, or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You reach us via email at rev11.15media@gmail.com. We hope you're enjoying the story and learning what the Bible reveals about end times prophecy and the final battle at Armageddon. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. May God keep and protect you always.